And a very happy Tuesday to you at 12:07 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in New Mexico.
John, yesterday marked 6 months since the start of the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire, and one of the biggest critics of the rebuilding process has been Rick Caruso, who said this on NBC4 yesterday.
And I know in the Palisades alone in the city of Los Angeles, less than 100 building permits have been issued. You know, that just is a terrible metric that shows the lack of coordination, the lack of a plan that the city has. And the county, quite frankly, I don't think is doing much better.
Rick makes an excellent point. You have sonar for quite frankly's.
Well, there's certain people that you just expect it from, like most of the members of the Board of Supervisors, but Rick Caruso has been a pretty reliable QFer.
Quite frankly, I don't think he's doing much better.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. As I mentioned before, I have read many of the books about the 2024 presidential election, whether it be the book Fight about how Kamala Harris won and how she lost the election, rather, and Donald Trump won the election. That'd be a different book. Yeah, that would be in the fiction section. Or the Jake Tapper book that talked about Joe Biden's cognitive decline. It doesn't matter which one you read, though. The point of each of the books is the same, which is the Democrats had a candidate who was, let's just say, not all there. They knew it, and they hid it from the public because they thought that he was their best shot at keeping the White House. After the debate, they realized they couldn't hide it anymore. The cat was out of the bag. Joe Biden is senile, and everyone now knows it, and they look like fools if they go on TV and claim that he's all there. That's when they dumped him, and they put Kamala in, and then she lost the election. Now they're saying, we need to make sure that never happens again. We have learned our lesson. We promise to tell the truth about how bad our candidates are, and hopefully that will help us beat the Republicans in future elections. However, the same crowd who claims that they learned their lesson with Joe Biden repeated the same behavior with Kamala Harris. Apparently, during the campaign, the shortened campaign for president, she decided to do a sit-down with a podcaster. We know, for example, that she was trying to get on Joe Rogan after Donald Trump did Joe Rogan. That didn't work out for her. And she did some of the left-wing podcasts, hoping to connect with younger voters, knowing that Donald Trump was doing quite well with them. One of the podcasts that she decided to do during the campaign was a podcast called Subway Takes, which is a liberal podcast that speaks to young liberal listeners. The Harris team thought that this was a no-brainer for them. Let's go ahead and put the candidate on a popular left-wing podcast. The problem is, according to the host of that podcast, it went off the rails almost immediately, and her performance was so embarrassing, the campaign went to the podcaster and asked them not to publicly release it. The podcaster, who was conducting the interview, agreed that her performance was so terrible, he would pull it and the podcast would never go to air. He said he did it because he didn't want to be blamed for her losing the election. Let's listen.
This is the podcaster Subway Takes on someone else's podcast talking about canceling that podcast.
He emailed me.
They emailed, like an email from the
DNC.
Okay.
And they said, hey, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really...
This is a TikTok, so that's why there's the jazzy music in the background.
Oh, we have to have the music.
Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really interested in being on your show. I said, that sounds cool.
Okay.
I'll at least get to tell my daughter that I met the potential president of the United States.
Yeah.
And so I said yes, based on the fact that it would be a good story. And also they both had good takes.
What happened with Kamala?
Her take was really confusing and weird and not good.
Confusing, weird, and not good.
That's a trifecta you don't want.
Her take was really confusing and weird and not good. And so mutually agreed that we shouldn't publish it.
I see.
And I got lucky because I didn't want to be blamed for her losing.
Her take was that bad?
It was really, really bad, and it was like didn't make any sense. I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice.
What?
Bacon as a spice.
I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice. Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice.
I don't know what that means, and I consider myself fairly culinarily educated.
Okay, is he saying that she was like bacon as a spice, or is he saying that that's one of the things that she said, where I guess she proclaimed that bacon is her favorite spice?
That could be. That's a softball question you would ask on a podcast. Hey, you love to cook, you love to be in that kitchen. What's your favorite spice? Bacon.
That sounds like a really dumb person on the Family Feud. All right. Top 5 answers on the board. Tell me a state that starts with new. Bing. Okay, Kamala, what say you? Nebraska. Play that last part one more time.
I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice. Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice.
You know, there are internet sleuths right now trying to figure out if this episode is somewhere on a server. I mean, the guy should release it now. I mean, the damage is already done. Let's hear the whole damn thing, because this woman wants to run for governor, maybe.
If she thinks bacon is a spice, she is the dumbest person on planet Earth. And that's saying a lot, because she shares this earth with all of the motorists in this state. Okay, if she believes that bacon is a spice, is that something you think she said because, I guess, she doesn't cook that much and maybe she thought, okay, it is a spice? Or does she think that that's something that would help her connect with young people because she knows that bacon is popular?
Maybe she thought it would be something funny to say, but the delivery was butchered.
Okay, that's a different version of Joe Biden.
Well, they got along famously, didn't they?
Joe, what do you think should be done in Ukraine? I'll have the chicken. Can you imagine what a private conversation between those two must have been like?
Oh, I can make one up right here.
We are clear and have been clear.
It has
We
to
are
be like
doing it.
two sinking ships passing in the night.
Didn't they have lunch like every other week?
I think they did, or at least she claimed that they did. And frequently the chef used bacon, which is her favorite spice. So her staff apparently colluded with this guy and his team to prevent the public from hearing this. He said if this were to go to air, she would have lost the election because of it. So maybe the bacon remark was a remark he thought that would turn her into Dan Quayle with how do you spell potato? Or maybe there's even more on this tape that is even more disqualifying than that.
Now, I'm very interested in how they did this, because if you know this guy's show, Subway Takes, he does the interviews on the New York subway, and they hold a Metro card as a pretend microphone. I need this video if it exists somewhere.
Oh, whatever it is, it has to be totally ridiculous. And this, again, from the same crowd who at the same time that this was going on was telling us that they learned their lesson and they're never, ever, ever going to hide an incompetent candidate from us again. And then this happens. Now, here's a theory. Maybe it wasn't that she made one statement or one remark that crossed a line. Maybe it was something else. Maybe, and let's go back and listen to what he said at the beginning of the tape. Let's play this tape again and think about it in this context. We know that there are some interviews that she gives where she's just loopy and she giggles and she can't stop giggling. Now, Randy, you like to imbibe on occasion with a cocktail or 10.
More than on occasion.
I like to drink myself. And we know, being of a certain vintage, let's say, and being around other people who like to throw them back, people react differently to alcohol. There are some people who become very aggressive and they want to fight, and those people should definitely not drink. There are some people who become sexually predatory, and they have a Me Too moment every time they blow a .2. Those people also shouldn't drink. Some people who are a little wound too tight let their hair down and they become fun to be around. Those people you want drinking. Some people just fall asleep. I've seen them too. Some people get sick immediately. They have headaches. They start throwing up, whatever the case may be. And then there are some people who just talk nonsense and can't stop giggling. I am starting to believe that she might be an alcoholic.
Oh, my.
And that the reason that she makes no sense half the time and she can't stop laughing is because she is legally drunk. Listen to what he had to say in the context of that theory.
Alleged theory.
He emailed me.
They emailed, like an email from the
DNC.
Okay.
And they said, hey, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really interested in being on your show. I said, that sounds cool.
Okay, what was Waltz's excuse?
Well, his natural state is what other people are like when they're drunk.
That sounds cool.
Okay.
I'll at least get to tell my daughter that I met the potential president of the United States.
Yeah.
And so I said yes, based on the fact that it would be a good story. And also they both had good takes.
What happened with Kamala?
Her take was really confusing and weird and not good. And so mutually agreed that we shouldn't publish it.
I see.
And I got lucky because I didn't want to be blamed for her losing.
Her take was that bad?
It was really, really bad, and it was like didn't make any sense. I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice. Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice.
Okay, if she is not coherent in a friendly interview, that's not something you do because of a lack of sleep. That's not something you do because you feel like you're under fire, you're being threatened. He wasn't going to threaten her in that interview. It's not as if she couldn't understand him because he has a thick accent. He's very clear. You understand what this man is saying. Now, let's go ahead and listen to the comedian Whitney Cummings, who was on with Bill Maher recently. This was before this was revealed. And listen to what Whitney Cummings had to say about Kamala Harris.
Fingers crossed there's no cursing in this clip.
No, like I was doing this joke.
This is what happens when you send me sound 3 seconds before the show.
Art, get your finger on the button.
No, like I was doing this joke last year about Kamala Harris before the election. Did you see those videos where she ostensibly was a little tipsy when she was giving speeches?
How could you tell? I mean, that was the problem.
Because I was like, mommy.
That was the problem with that. One of the problems.
But I was doing a joke about it going like, maybe this is what we need. What is scarier than an alcoholic woman with no children? Truly nothing. I mean, this is the level of fearlessness we would like. Imagine she's like drunk dials Putin at 2 a.m. like, hey, homo. Like this could be good. And everyone would get it. Everyone would get it. And then I went to New York and it went like okay. It was kind of, and someone was like, I've never seen that video. I'm like, my whole feed is Kamala Harris drunk, giving speeches. And there's other people that didn't even get it. So it's like we all have these
that's the problem.
We have these bespoke algorithms. I almost feel like when we start talking to each other, we have to do like an algo check.
So she sees it too. Whitney Cummings, very popular stand-up comedian. And Bill Maher saw it. So here's our question to you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. What do you think is the reason that Kamala Harris's team asked this podcaster to pull the interview? That interview never made it to air. No one saw it who wasn't in the room before the election. He said had the interview aired, she would have lost and he would have been blamed. He said she was not coherent in the interview and made no sense. My theory is that she was drunk. What say you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222? Your calls coming up right here on The John Phillips Show. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Brad writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com and says, my bet is prescription meds and booze. There's no way that she could be that bad with just booze. It takes too much.
And if you were to go back and listen to yesterday's monologue about the sweeps in MacArthur Park, I know a lot of people were sharing it on social media, but you can go back and listen to it or send it to friends if you want to.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can do a Google on the YouTube. Get the KABC app. Get the KSFO app. Share the episodes with your friends, your family. Put them on your Facebook groups so everyone can hear the nonsense that comes out of the mouth of Karen Bass.
If you're feeling down, if you're feeling blue, let's get help for you.
And Randy, we're now on the air in Fresno.
Every Saturday from 2 to 3, catch the Fix California Hour with John Phillips and Randy Wang on KMJ in Fresno. That's AM 580, 105.9 on the FM dial. Or you could stream it live at kmjnow.com.
Kamala Harris did a friendly interview with a podcaster that went off the rails. He said if it went to air, she would have lost the election and everyone would have blamed him. What do you think she did on that podcast that caused him to pull it and never allow you to hear it? I think she may have been a little tipsy. What say you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Eric the Mailman writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Hey, cool John and Hot Randy. Kamala Harris absolutely must like bacon-infused ginger spice mixed with her Hennessy. America's wine mom loves her sauce.
Absolutely.
Well, you could have bacon-infused vodka if you wanted to, couldn't you?
You can bacon-infuse anything.
That would be quite a mix for Bloody Marys. Let's go ahead and listen to this podcaster, Subway Takes, one more time on why he never released his interview before the election with Kamala Harris.
And by the way, if you've never heard of this show, this guy goes on the subway and he interviews people, usually for about 3 minutes. So it was 3 minutes that we're talking about here that could have ended her political career.
He emailed me.
They emailed, like an email from the
DNC.
Okay.
And they said, hey, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really interested in being on your show. I said, that sounds cool.
Okay.
I'll at least get to tell my daughter that I met the potential president of the United States.
Yeah.
And so I said yes, based on the fact that it would be a good story. And also they both had good takes.
What happened with Kamala?
Her take was really confusing and weird and not good. And so mutually agreed that we shouldn't publish it.
I see.
And I got lucky because I didn't want to be blamed for her losing.
Her take was that bad?
It was really, really bad, and it was like didn't make any sense. I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice. Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice.
All right. What do you think happened in that interview that was so far over the line where both sides decided it would be a good idea not to publish it? My theory is that she was on the sauce. What say you at 800-222-5222? Let's go to Steve in Laguna Beach. Steve, hello.
Hi, guys. Best audience call-in question of the month. Thank you. Randy nailed it, by the way, that the podcaster needs to release it now anyway because he would make bank. But I will agree. First of all, remember that in the Rogan podcast, they were the Kamala team required Rogan to go to New York and only have scripted questions. She is non-functional on Q&A when she doesn't have a script and she's not prepped. That's the first thing. Secondly, I agree with your mailbag caller that it's got to be a mix because she lost 90% of her staff. She's known to be an aggressive, angry bitch. Therefore, I'm thinking Xanax and Chardonnay because she's like way too happy, and then she can become unburdened with the bacon. And finally, guys, you should check out Estee Patel. She nailed, and the Whitney Cummings soundbite was awesome. Estee Patel does a killer impression of Kamala and Kamala drunk. It's like Sean Farish on X. It's a delight to behold, and she hits all the sound bites and the word salad. It's worth it. If you like to hate on Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris drunk, Patel is the way to go. And thanks for letting me talk to you guys about it.
Thank you for the call, Sarah. And, you know, Randy, I'll tell you, there's something else that those of us in California should think about. And that is this. She is allegedly interested in federal issues. She's interested in abortion. She's interested in the Supreme Court. She's interested in climate change. She's interested in international conflict. She's interested in issues that the federal government has a purview over. She has no interest in California subjects. I can't think of anything she's ever had to say about our insurance crisis or about the budget problem that's going on right now in Sacramento or crime, homelessness, anything at least recently. In fact, she wouldn't even take a position on Proposition 36. If this is how she performs when she's interested in the subject matter, what kind of candidate do they think she's going to be like when she's campaigning for an office that she doesn't even want and talking about subjects that she doesn't care about?
It's going to be a mess. However, compared to the competition, she might stand out next to this guy or this guy.
Scrub it.
That's true. Let's go to Ruby in Dublin. Ruby, hello.
Hi. I think she blew it by mixing up her campaign with President Trump's. I think she was somehow talking about herself and said, then you should vote for President Trump. That's what I think happened. Otherwise, they would have played it. They played everything else she said that was stupid.
So you think it was like her Grampy Joe moment when he said, we beat Medicare?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's a possibility. Although, Randy, if it was just a simple misspeak, I think that they could clean that up and she could correct herself, or even the interviewer could say, well, did you mean this? Oh, yeah, that's what I meant. And then they just move on.
Since this interview was taking place on the subway, what if they started filming and she sat down in a pile of you-know-what and then started screaming at everybody?
Or maybe someone OD'd next to her and she felt so embarrassed because she forgot her Narcan. Let's go to Neil in Campbell. Neil, hello.
Hello, how you doing? I love your show. I was curious what their facial expression, either Joe or her, whichever clown they asked, if it was milk duds or milk dudes. Or maybe watch their facial expression if they asked them, why do zebras have stripes?
All right. Thank you for the call, Sarah. Did you get that, Randy?
I'm going to try to not analyze it.
That's probably for the best.
Now, I mean, we took the call, and that's what the call said on the screen. That was on you.
Now, here's a question. This guy is actually talking about how bad the interview was publicly. Usually when things like this happen, they don't like to brag about it. I wonder how many other friendly interviews took place that were so bad they never aired it, and the people who conducted those interviews never talked about it publicly.
You think there's more?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This happens, I'm not going to say all the time, but it does happen, particularly for friendly interviews. I think I told the story on these airwaves at some point in the past, but I was a guest on a cable news program some years ago. This is not recently. This is a long time ago. And on the same program, there was another panelist who was there who said something racially so far over the line that it would have been a massive scandal had that comment aired. Everyone on the panel just sat there with their jaw on the ground. No one reacted to it, and the host just threw it to commercial. Now, many cable news programs are aired live. You go on, let's just say, one of the morning shows. You go on the CNN morning show or Fox and Friends or whatever. Those programs air live. So that's why Fox and Friends comes on at 3 o'clock in the morning, or whatever they're calling the CNN morning show, comes on very early in the morning because they're not tape delayed like, let's say, the Today Show. The Today Show, for the West Coast audience, is tape delayed. They taped it earlier in the morning, but they want you to see it while you're having your breakfast and you're getting ready for work, so they delay it for the West Coast. And they, I think, delay it for the Middle West as well, and certainly the Rocky Mountain West. Well, this particular program was being taped for air later that day. After it happened, I thought to myself, okay, I didn't say it. I didn't react to it. I was just sitting there when the remark was made. But knowing what I know about cancel culture and knowing what I know about how the world actually operates, I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to get in trouble for simply being there, or I'm going to get in trouble for not reacting a certain way to it, along with everyone else on the panel. And I thought that in real time. So as soon as the program ended and everyone's getting off the stage to go to the makeup room to get the makeup taken off, I walk over to the host, and I'm 6'4". I'm not what I would call an imposing person, but I'm just physically large. And I walk over to the host, who is not anywhere near as large as me, and I grab the host by the arm and I pull the host close to me. And I whisper in the host's ear, "You cannot air that under any circumstances, or everyone is going to get dragged into this drama." And the host turned to me and he said, "Oh, I know. I've already talked to the producers, and that's coming out." Thankfully, no one reacted to it, so it won't look odd when it airs on television later on in the evening. And that's what happened. And this particular individual who made the remark never had to face the backlash over what was said. No one leaked it to the press. No one talked about it in a public forum. I guess I'm doing that now, but I'm not telling you who it is, and I won't. So don't email me that question. I'm not going to give you the answer. I'll tell Randy, but that's it. Well, I'll tell Art too. But the issue becomes, it was just something that was never put in the public domain. And with Kamala and with her performances, her questionable performances, let's just call them, I bet you the same thing is true, particularly in the friendly interviews, although we know that CBS News did the same thing. When she was on 60 Minutes and she was basically incoherent, they edited the interview before the election to make her look smarter and more with it and more mentally stable than she otherwise would. That was a program that had it in for Trump too, because they invited both candidates to appear on 60 Minutes, where they would have interviewed Kamala the same way they did, and they would have gone after Trump with knives. Well, Trump at that point in time decided that he didn't need the legacy media to win the election, that he could go on Rogan and he could go on The Undertaker and he could go on Theo Vaughn and he could go on all of these non-traditional programs and speak to not just his audience, but speak to an audience that they were trying to win over, namely young men young black men, young Latino men, young white men, young Asian men. And they found them through the podcasts. And they didn't need 60 Minutes because that crowd wasn't watching 60 Minutes. But Kamala went on 60 Minutes, and they did her a solid by editing the interview to make her look better. And then, of course, that became public, and there was a lawsuit, and that became a massive scandal that involved the president of CBS News. This just seems to be the way that she was treated by the news media, both the mainstream media and the left-wing media. They bent over backwards to sell her to the public. They bent over backwards to smooth out her rough edges, and it still didn't work. And I made this point before, but I think it's important to make it again, because this is the same crowd that did the same thing with Joe Biden. And they said, cross my heart, hope to die, never do it again. That was a one-time thing, and we learned our lesson. We're bad boys and girls. We all got spanked, but never again. We promise. And then right after they did it with Joe and tried to cover up his senility, they did the same thing with Kamala Harris to try to cover up her incompetence. And you better believe that in the next election, the same people are going to do the same thing if they end up with another bad candidate. They're going to have to find a way to make them seem more reasonable, make them seem more with it than they actually are. That's my theory. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. The Fix California Hour coming up after the news at 1. Cal Thomas joins us later on in the program. Let's go to Dave in Orange. Dave, hello.
Hey, guys. Love the show. She's going to get the coverage. Donald Trump got 97% negative coverage and still won. There's no such thing as the mainstream media. It's just left-wing media. And you know that because all of the talking heads on and John, you probably know this, you see this, they all get the same talking points, saying the exact same thing. Where does that come from? It comes from the Democratic National Committee.
Well, I'll tell you this. As much as they tried to help her, they still couldn't get her across the finish line. And I say that because the most damaging interview that she probably did through this entire campaign was the most friendly interview. And that was on The View when Sunny Hostin asked her if there were any differences between her or Joe Biden or anything that she would have done differently. And she had no answer. The moment that that question was asked to her and she had no answer, it was over. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Pete in San Pedro. Pete, hello.
Hey, good afternoon. I just it comes full circle back to the cocaine in the White House. I just, suddenly it's like, that makes so much more sense than we know who everybody assumed at the time.
So wait, so you think it was Kamala doing the cocaine and not Hunter, or do you think both of them were doing it together?
Yeah. No. I mean, he could get it anywhere. He probably had it in his pocket. He didn't need to have somebody shuttle it in, but I bet she did.
Well, there you go. Maybe it was Kamala on the cocaine, says the caller. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Allegedly.
Well, she is thin. How much sleep does she get? Did she work on Wall Street in the 80s? You never know. Well, I don't know if it was her, but strange things happen in that city, in Washington, D.C. That I can tell you. All right, we've got 2 more hours coming up on the John Phillips Show. The Fix California Hour is next. Don't you go anywhere.